The exam room aboard the orbital academy station Trine Delta was a mess of blinking consoles, mapping drones, and the low thrum of cross-species anxiety. The walls shimmered with projected star charts of Sector 9 Alpha, a notoriously convoluted region of space that twisted gravitational fields like ribbons in a hurricane. The test was simple in theory. Use given data to plot a course from the Shatterlight Nebula to the mining colony on Orthies Roman 4 using standard galactic coordinates. In practice, only one of the 23 cadets had managed to even submit an answer. That one cadet was a human named Silas Grant. He stood at his desk with a metal compass, a sheet of laminated star chart, and a roll of grease pencils. His hair was damp with sweat, and his left sleeve was stained with ink. The alien instructor, Professor Eltoon, leaned over him with two of its 4 eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Your method is analog," Eltoon said, trying to find a more diplomatic term. "Why are you not using the navigation interface?" Silas didn't look up. He kept moving the compass along the chart, marking arcs and angles. "Because the interface crashed," he said. "And when I asked for paper backups, your assistant gave me this chart and a compass like I was being punished, so I figured might as well use it." Eltoon blinked all 4 eyes slowly. "That was not intended as punishment. Those are ceremonial artifacts for display." "They work," Silas muttered. Across the room, chaos. A green-skinned cadet named Varnix was hyperventilating into a pouch of recycled air. Another, Helon, was arguing with his own interface, which had started displaying coordinates for an entirely different galaxy. The rest were mostly frozen, staring at their malfunctioning consoles or whispering to each other in desperation. Eltoon floated backward, unsure how to address the situation. The exam was a required module for interstellar navigation certification. Without passing, none of the cadets would be allowed to pilot or even co-navigate a vessel beyond domestic orbit. The Academy handbook had no protocol for entire class fails, except for one human using outdated tools. Silas finally looked up. Done. He stepped back from his desk, wiped his hands on his pants, and let out a long breath. Eltoon floated over to the chart. The grease pencil markings were crude but unmistakably correct. The plotted course avoided all major gravitational shears, skirted a rogue asteroid field with a 10-kilometer buffer, and arrived at Orthies Roman 4 with a margin of error under 200 meters. He ran the coordinates through a backup simulator. They matched. "You are certain this is correct?" Eltoon asked. "Cross-checked it 3 times, Silas said, rubbing his eyes. "I've done this kind of plotting before. Back on Earth, we still use charts for ocean navigation sometimes. My uncle taught me when I was 12. "Ocean, navigation," Eltoon repeated. "Water," Silas said. "Big salty stuff. Moves ships around, kinda like space, but wetter." Eltoon didn't respond. He floated to the center of the room and raised his voice. "Cadets, the navigation test is suspended until further notice. You will be assigned remedial plotting sessions beginning tomorrow at cycle start." Groans erupted from the room. One cadet pounded his desk. Another simply collapsed into a heap. Silas sat back down, completely drained. Later, in the debrief room, Eltoon stood facing Silas across a table. The walls were lined with holographic representations of star systems, some still flickering with incomplete data. A tray of nutrient bars sat untouched between them. "You have never interfaced with our standard nav systems before," Eltoon said. "Yet you passed a test that defeated 17 species." "I didn't beat anyone," Silas said. "The system glitched. I just used what I knew. Honestly, I thought I'd fail on some minor error. But you did not." "No." Eltoon tapped a long, translucent finger on the table. "We are taught that progress lies in abandoning the obsolete, but you succeeded by returning to it." "Not obsolete," Silas said, "just overlooked." The professor stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the compass and chart, turning them over in his hands. He handed them back to Silas. "Keep these," Eltoon said. "The Academy will study your methods. In the meantime, you are excused from remedial sessions." "Thanks," Silas said. He stood, wincing slightly. His shoulders were sore from hours hunched over the desk. "I'll hit the med bay before I cramp into a fossil." As he left, Varnix passed him in the hall, still pale. You used a circle tool, Varnix asked. It's called a compass. And it worked. Yeah, Varnix looked like he was going to be sick. Silas kept walking. That night he couldn't sleep. His bunk was too narrow and the station lights never fully dimmed. He sat up and unfolded the chart again, studying the markings. There was something comforting about it, something solid. He didn't understand half the systems on the station, but this he could work with. The next morning, he was summoned to the simulation lab. Eltoon and two other instructors waited for him. A new simulation was loaded, a rescue mission through a dense cluster with limited sensor visibility. The other cadets stood around the perimeter, watching with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. You will plot the course manually, Eltoon said. We want to observe your method in real time. And what if I screw up? Then we learn from your failure. Silas shrugged. Fair enough. He took the chart, compass, and pencils. He examined the start and destination points, then began plotting. He spoke aloud as he worked. Clusters dense. Too risky through the center. Will swing wide, use gravitational assist from that neutron pair. Need to adjust for time dilation. Okay here. He worked for over an hour. At one point his hand cramped and he had to stretch it out. The other cadets started whispering to each other. Some were taking notes. Helon looked like he was ready to punch a wall. When Silas finished, the instructors ran the simulation. The plotted course succeeded. The rescue vessel avoided all hazards and arrived with fuel to spare. Eltoon floated forward. You will assist in teaching the remedial sessions. Silas blinked. I'm not a teacher. You are now. And so began the weirdest stretch of Silas Grant's life. He became a reluctant instructor, dragging cadets through sessions on astrogation using compasses, protractors, and printed charts. He taught them how to read topological distortions from raw data, how to manually calculate jump windows, and how to use their own spatial instincts instead of relying on AI suggestions. It was not glamorous. It was not quick. Varnix nearly quit 3 times. Helon refused to speak to him for a week after failing the first practice run. But slowly, grudgingly, the cadets began to improve. One day, during a practice exam, Varnix actually plotted a successful course. It was a little jagged but viable. Silas grinned. Look at that. You didn't even cry this time. I came close, Varnix muttered. Eltoon observed from the back of the room. He said nothing, but he tapped his fingers together thoughtfully. Then came the field test. A real mission. A shuttle had gone off course beyond the Serene drift, and the nav AI had failed mid-jump. The Academy dispatched a training vessel to assist, and Eltoon insisted that a mixed team of cadets take the lead, using manual plotting only. Silas was assigned as mission supervisor. This is insane, he said, strapping into the seat. It is an opportunity, Eltoon replied. The cadets were tense. The Serene drift was known for its unpredictable gravitational eddies. The wrong move could trap a ship for days. Silas stood behind Varnix as he worked the chart. Don't cut that corner, Silas said. The eddy near Theta 9 will pull you sideways. But if I swing wide, we lose time. Better late than dead, Varnix adjusted. The route stabilized. The vessel reached the stranded shuttle after 3 hours. The crew was shaken but unharmed. A second path was plotted for return, this time by Helon. It was rough but functional. Back at the Academy, the cadets were greeted with quiet applause. No grand ceremony, just a line of instructors nodding silently as they walked past. Silas was called into Eltoon's office the next day. You have altered our curriculum, Eltoon said. I didn't mean to. Exactly why it worked. Silas rubbed the back of his neck. So what now? You will continue teaching, and you will be compensated. With what? A private quarters, and actual Earth food. We imported something called chili. Silas laughed. For the first time in weeks, it sounded genuine. Deal. He walked out of the office, compass in one hand, chart in the other. For once, he wasn't just the weird human on the station. He was the guy who brought the stars back to basics. Silas squinted at the floating display above his bunk, which politely reminded him that it was 30 minutes past the allotted waking cycle. He disabled the chime days ago after it startled him into knocking his head against the console shelf. He swung his legs over the edge, grimacing as he stretched. His neck made a sound like someone stepping on a frozen twig. There was a knock, more of a tone sequence, really, at the door. "Open," he said, and the panel slid away with its usual too energetic swoosh. An unfamiliar creature stood in the hallway. It was tall, with an elongated cranial ridge that made it look like someone had stretched a squid over a walking stick. Its skin shimmered faintly, like oil on water. "Cadet Grant," it said in a voice that didn't so much echo as ripple. "You are summoned to Auxiliary Navigation Chamber 7, he blinked. "I didn't even know there were 7. "You do now." Silas threw on his uniform jacket, still damp from last night's synthetic wash cycle, and followed the alien down a corridor that twisted just slightly too often to be comfortable. The academy was built by a species that thought in spirals, which meant straight lines were almost offensive. Every hallway was gently curved, and after weeks of walking them, his ankles had started to complain. Inside Chamber 7, the lights were dimmed, and the air had a faint metallic bite to it. A large table dominated the room, not unlike a conference table, but with an embedded projection dome. Around it stood Eltoon and 3 more instructors Silas hadn't interacted with before. One of them had no visible face and communicated via a series of vibrations that translated into text floating in the air. "Sit," Eltoon said. "We require your perspective on an inconsistency." Silas pulled out the only human-compatible chair, which was still slightly too low for comfort. "What kind of inconsistency?" "Interspecies navigation standards," said the faceless one, its text appearing in a calm green glow. "There is disagreement about the threshold of acceptable unpredictability." "Well," Silas leaned forward, "if you're navigating through space and something unpredictable happens, then the word acceptable becomes relative to whether or not you explode." The instructors didn't laugh. The faceless one's text flickered. "Your planet developed navigation without reliance on centralized galactic infrastructure. This independence has produced anomalies." "Anomalies like surviving long enough to make it here?" Silas asked. Eltoon raised one finger. "The concern is not survival. The concern is methodology. Your calculations resemble instinct more than process." Silas frowned. "Instinct's just compressed experience. You live through enough bad calls, you start making better ones without needing a flowchart." The instructor to Eltoon's left, a being covered in flexible plates that clinked softly when it moved, gestured toward the projection dome. A simulation began to play, a ship mid-jump. A cascade of failed waypoints, a collision course with a distorted mass signature. "This vessel was lost last cycle," the plated one said. "Their system failed during a subspace calibration. No one on board was trained in manual plotting." Silas watched the ship spin toward a gravity well. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because we are implementing a contingency program," Eltoon said. "You will assist in developing the training module." "I teach once with a compass and suddenly I'm rewriting curriculum." "Yes." Silas sighed and rubbed his temples. "Okay, but I need access to the incident logs, and I want one of your plotting spheres, the ones with raw telemetry input." "You will have them," said the faceless one. "And one assistant." The assistant turned out to be a cadet named Prill, whose species resembled a 6-legged crane with translucent skin. She carried an array of tools tucked into pouches along each limb, and her accent sounded like a flute being played underwater. "You do not use formulas," she said as they began reviewing the logs. "I use them," Silas replied. "Just not the way you expect." Prill tilted her head. "Then explain this." She pointed at a section of the flight path where the doomed ship had made a correction that worsened their trajectory. "They adjusted based on a predicted distortion that hadn't materialized yet," he said. "They trusted the projection model instead of waiting for real data, common mistake. But the model had a 97% probability. Still a guess," Silas said. "Space doesn't care about your confidence intervals." Over the next few days, they worked through 37 case files. Silas scrawled notes on a growing stack of laminated charts, while Prill transcribed them into digital overlays. She asked questions constantly, but never repeated herself. Her curiosity was surgical. "I do not understand your notations," she said one morning, tapping a symbol Silas had drawn. "That's a timing cue," he said. Means wait for sensor confirmation from at least 2 vectors before initiating thrust. But it is not standardized. Nope. Then how do others read it? They don't. This is for me. Prill paused. Then it is not a system. It is, he said. Just not one you've seen before. The next simulation they ran used one of Silas's replotted trajectories. It involved a detour through a radiation belt and a slingshot around a dwarf star. The computer flagged it as unorthodox but executed without incident. Eltoon reviewed the results. Your path was 20% longer than the automated recovery route. But survivable, Silas said, barely. That's usually enough. Eltoon folded his arms, a gesture borrowed from humans. We cannot build policy on barely. Why not? Silas asked. Most of us live between barely and not quite. Later that week, Silas collapsed in the med bay. He woke up with a dull ache in his chest and 2 electrodes taped haphazardly across his ribs. A nurse avian, with feathers that refracted light, glanced at him without much concern. You were dehydrated and sleep-deprived, it said. Also, your blood sugar was so low the scanner thought you were in hibernation. Silas groaned. They don't even let me sleep in peace anymore. You were found unconscious in the data vault, it added. Clutching a compass and muttering about variable density lanes. He tried to sit up. His arms felt like they'd been filled with cold sand. You will remain here until your glucose stabilizes, the nurse said. Also, you are banned from caffeine for 48 hours. Cruelty is universal, I see. Eltoon arrived a few hours later holding a holopad and a nutrient bar. You are inefficient with your own biology, he said. Silas took the bar and bit into it. So's everyone who tries to do something useful. We have reviewed your training module draft. It violates 6 procedural guidelines. Only 6. I'm getting better. Eltoon didn't respond. You're going to implement it anyway, aren't you? Yes. Silas leaned back against the wall, chewing slowly. You're welcome. There is one condition, Eltoon said. Let me guess, Silas said. I have to teach another class. You must train the instructors, Silas choked. You want them to plot by hand, Eltoon nodded. That'll go over well. Your sarcasm is noted, Eltoon said, but the directive is already approved. The following week, Silas stood in front of a room filled with the same instructors who once dismissed his methods as primitive. He held up a grease pencil. This, he said, is the tool that may save your ship when your fancy systems decide they've had enough. No one laughed. One instructor actually flinched. He uncapped the pencil. Let's begin. The first ink smear hit the projection dome before anyone spoke. Silas had been trying to draw a correction arc, but the pen had cracked at the tip, and now a black blot ran down the side of the display like a melting comet. Across the table, Instructor Rav, a spherical being covered in fine, iridescent quills, recoiled not from the ink, but from the sheer inelegance of the act. That is an archival display surface, Rav said. It is not designed for pigment. Silas pressed the back of his hand to his forehead and sighed. You asked me to demonstrate manual adjustment techniques. This is how I do it. Rav's quills twitched in tight spirals. Demonstration implies simulation, not vandalism. Relax. It wipes off. Silas reached for a cloth and began scrubbing. The projection trembled and reset itself with a soft beep. He glanced at the others 9 instructors ranging from various sectors, all assigned to evaluate the viability of his emergency navigation training. Not one of them looked convinced. One was visibly holding a stylus like it was a surgical tool. All right, Silas said, setting the cloth aside. Let's try a different approach. No ink this time. I'll walk you through a real scenario. One I've actually lived through. Instructor Tile, a gelatinous being with embedded nodules that blinked in sequence when it processed speech, shifted slightly. You have experienced a subspace collapse without AI assistance. Sort of, Silas said. Not subspace. But I was on a cargo hauler that lost primary systems during a solar flare. We had to replot using only visual markers and a backup gyroscope. Took us 32 hours to drift into a safe vector. There was silence. Then Instructor Jorel, a tall creature with a latticework of bioluminescent veins running down its arms, leaned forward. What reference points did you use? Silas drew 3 dots on the dome with his fingertip. We had eyes on one stable pulsar, an old comms relay, and a debris ring from a mining operation. None of them were in the nav maps anymore. You trusted obsolete data, Jorel asked. We trusted what we could see, that's the point. When everything else fails, you don't wait for the perfect map. You use what's in front of you. Rav's quills had stilled. You are suggesting instinct should override protocol. No, Silas said, lowering his voice. I'm saying instinct fills the gap when protocol doesn't cover the mess you're in. The instructors exchanged glances. Prill, seated quietly to the side with a tablet balanced across two limbs, began entering notes. Instructor Avon, who had not spoken until now, raised a single translucent claw. Then show us. Simulate the flare scenario, no computers, no projections, just your method. Silas hesitated. You want to simulate a full navigation reset with no interface? Yes. This isn't going to be elegant. Avon didn't blink. We are not here for elegance. They cleared the dome and dimmed the overheads. Silas reached into his case and pulled out a folded star chart, yellowed at the edges from heavy use. He set it flat on the surface and retrieved a grease pencil, twirling it between his fingers. All right, he said. The flare knocks out our long-range sensors. We're drifting. Engines are locked. We've got visual contact with 3 objects. One gives us pulse intervals call that the beacon. The relay's dead, but its location is fixed, and the debris field is spread across 6 degrees of arc from our viewport. He began sketching rough positions, drawing lines and intersecting arcs. His hands moved quickly but without flourish. He wasn't performing, he was working. I know our ship's orientation from the gyroscope. We drifted 40 minutes with lateral thrust before systems went down, so we've shifted here. He pointed to a zone between 2 plotted lines. He paused, eyes narrowing. Now the key is triangulation. Even if we can't get an exact fix, we narrow the error margin. 2 bearings intersect with a known angular delay on the beacon pulses. Gives us a probable location here. He marked a small triangle. Then we use light lag from the visual pulse to estimate range. Not perfect, but enough to plan a retrograde burn when we get power back. He stepped away. There, that's how we found our way back. Prill stood and examined the chart. She didn't speak, but she traced the lines with one claw, then nodded once. Instructor Tile pulsed. You computed drift using only visual delay. Yup, that is, inadvisable, but it worked. Rav exhaled, which sounded like a faint rustle. I do not understand why you continue to advocate for methods that depend on guesswork. It's not guesswork, Silas said. It's judgment. I'm not saying throw out your systems. I'm saying when they stop responding, you should have something left to fall back on besides panic. Instructor Avon turned to the others. We have seen the result. It is functional, if inelegant. That's the second time someone's called it inelegant, Silas said. Maybe that's the charm. 2 days later, the instructors convened for final review. Silas wasn't invited to that meeting. Instead, he found himself in a small recovery room, undergoing routine post-collapse checks. The academy medic, a broad-shouldered reptilian with a surprisingly gentle manner, took another blood sample and frowned at the results. You are still depleted, the medic said. You need more complex carbohydrates. And rest. I've had 3 full meals and slept 10 hours last night, Silas replied. You slept under your desk. It was quiet. The medic made a low, disapproving sound. You push your limits even when not threatened. I don't like wasting time. You are not time. You are tissue, Silas blinked. That's oddly poetic. It is not a compliment. He left the med bay with a prescription for a starch-heavy diet and a warning to avoid caffeine for another day. He ignored both. By the end of the week, a new training module had been approved. It required all cadets to complete a manual navigation exercise as part of their final exam. The curriculum was supplemented with Silas's case studies and included a rotating chart lab staffed by him and Prill. Varnix showed up first, clutching a set of printed coordinates with a look of genuine dread. I've never used one of these before, he said, holding up a protractor like it might bite him. You will, Silas said. Start with a straight line. Just one. By the end of the session, Varnix had completed a rough plot that missed the target by less than a kilometer. He looked at it like it was a miracle. I didn't think I could do it without the interface. You didn't, Silas said. You did it with your head. Eltoon visited the lab quietly a few days later. He watched from the doorway as Silas guided 3 cadets through a triangulation problem. Prill stood nearby, calibrating a visual aid made from transparent overlays and colored markers. Your methods have disrupted our expectations, Eltoon said once the cadets had left. They weren't supposed to. But they did. Silas folded the chart and wiped the dome clean. So now what? Now we recalibrate the Academy's assumptions. He offered Silas a small case clasped shut with a magnetic seal. Inside was a new compass forged from carbon titanium alloy engraved with the Academy's insignia. Symbolic, Eltoon said. Silas turned it in his hands, then looked up. I'll keep it close, but I'll still be using the old one, of course. Outside the lab, the corridor curved away into the soft hum of station life. Silas stepped into it, compass in one pocket, laminated chart under his arm. The hallway bent left, then right again, and he followed it without hesitation, already tracing imagined arcs in his mind.